Hey everyone, welcome to another Cybersecurity Insights. I'm Mark the Liberty, Security Operations Manager at WatchGuard Technologies, and today we're going to talk about common malware evasion techniques and some defensive tips to catch these modern threats. The reason we're talking about evasive malware today is because adversaries are increasingly using tools and techniques that allow their attacks to sneak past legacy anti-malware services. If you've ever read our quarterly internet security report out of the WatchGuard Threat Lab or visited our threat landscape page on secplicity.org, you've probably seen this zero-day malware number that we track using the threat intelligence we get from Firebox appliances deployed across the world. For those of you that are new to this, when we talk about zero-day malware, we're not talking about a zero-day exploit, which would be an attack against an unpatched vulnerability. When we say zero-day malware, we're talking about malware that doesn't have a signature, allowing it to get past signature-based anti-malware services. And that could be because it's brand new and it just doesn't have a signature at all, or more commonly because attackers are using some of the tools that we're going to discuss over the next few minutes to take any old payload, even multiple years old, and make it evasive enough to get past these signature-based services. In Q2 of this year, that zero-day malware number was 61.1%. So around 2/3 of all malware evaded signature-based defenses. And this has been trending upward over the past few years. A couple of years ago, it was down around 40%. And even then, I still remember being like, wow, okay, 2/5 of all malware, that's way too much to be missing just because you're relying on a single anti-malware service. And it's only gone up from there. And that's because, as you'll see, many of these tools have become increasingly easier and more effective so that any low-skilled attacker can take any old malware payload and allow it to get past these legacy tools. Now, when it comes to the tools and techniques, let's start with the first one, and it's the big one. And honestly, living off the land attacks, or fileless malware as it's commonly called, has already been its own Cybersecurity Insights video. I highly recommend you check that out. But at a high level, when we talk about living off the land attacks, we're talking about malware that uses the tools built into our operating system, like PowerShell and NetSH, to carry out all of its malicious actions. All of the code, all of the attack actions that otherwise would have been in a malware binary, an actual application, instead can be executed using these tools and scripts that are just built into our computers. In fact, there's entire toolkits like PowerSploit and PowerWare and Cobalt Strike, tools that you've probably heard of, that allow, again, any even low-skilled attacker to take malicious code and inject it into the process of other memory and execute it from there. And they're often fileless, meaning they're evading the traditional endpoint protections we have on our systems that just scan downloads and scan files saved onto our hard drive. Instead, they run only in memory. So if you aren't using tools that check the memory of existing and new processes for malicious activity, you're going to miss the bulk of these threats. They usually start with an Office document containing either macros or an exploit to kind of kick off the attack. These days, attackers have a wide range of exploits and vulnerabilities in Microsoft Office and other tools that can let them get past a lot of the safety features that Microsoft and other manufacturers have built in and kick off some of these robust scripting languages that are built into these tools. Another really common technique are cryptors, which have honestly been around for decades. They're often for sale on underground marketplaces at a low cost, like we're talking just tens of dollars, not hundreds or thousands. And cryptors at a high level just take malicious code, whatever the payload's going to be, encrypt it, and attach it to this little program called a stub. And that stub basically contains all of the instructions needed to then decrypt that payload, inject it into memory, and execute it. And the reason that this style of evasion techniques is really common and effective is because it's actually really difficult to block those stub programs without a lot of collateral damage. It's really easy to detect them. Basically, any old anti-malware service could probably catch that. But if they start trying to block it, they're going to block a lot of legitimate applications that look very similar to those stubs. As I'm sure that many of you that work in the IT field on the front lines are aware of, any friction caused to end users like that with blocking legitimate applications is the quickest way to get your anti-malware protections just completely disabled and shut off at a policy level. That's why attackers are abusing this style of tool, because they know they're difficult to catch without a lot of that collateral damage. And then the final evasion technique uses some basic tools that we use every day to protect our privacy as we browse on the internet. Free certificate authorities like Let's Encrypt have made it easy for anyone to set up HTTPS encryption on any website or any web application they want. And unfortunately, just with many other good tools and technologies, attackers have used the same activity to then encrypt and mask a lot of their malware delivery as it comes through your network perimeter. In fact, in Q2 of this year, 91.5% of the malware detections we saw arrived over an encrypted connection. And that's despite only 20% or so of our customer networks actually using HTTPS inspection. This means if you're not inspecting encrypted traffic at your network perimeter, you're going to be missing 9/10 of malware threats out there, basically removing an entire layer of your security and pushing it off to the side. So how do you defend against these evasive threats? And let's start from the back to the front. When it comes to HTTPS encrypted threats, you want to make sure you've set up HTTPS inspection wherever you can. This means if your endpoint device is behind another appliance capable of HTTPS inspection, you should absolutely configure it. And I get it. It's easy for me to sit up here on my ivory tower and say, oh, just set up HTTPS encryption. It's not as easy as a single checkbox that you can hit to turn everything online and have it work perfectly. There is a bit of work you have to do. If you're not already using Microsoft Active Directory, you'll have to set up a trusted certificate authority for your environment. You'll have to figure out how to sign and deploy certificates to your endpoints or deploy a new content inspection certificate onto your perimeter inspection device. But every single minute of time that you invest into setting up HTTPS inspection directly translates to additional security for your organization. Because without it, you're letting most malware threats slip past your perimeter and arrive straight onto the endpoint, where then you're just relying on basically your final defenses to try and catch it before it's too late. Now, when it comes to those anti-malware services, you want to make sure that you've set up layers of proactive advanced anti-malware. This starts with using tools like machine learning based engines that are trained with millions of known good and known bad payloads that then allow them to quickly come to a determination on if they think something is good or if it's bad. But again, you don't want to rely on just a single layer of protection, so make sure that's backed up with other tools too, including ones that use behavioral detection, preferably in a cloud sandbox, where now you can take any suspicious looking file, send it up into a controlled environment and detonate it, and then just watch its behaviors. Because at the end of the day, malware is going to do something malicious. It's going to try and encrypt all of your files, or steal your data, or set up a command and control beacon. And if you're able to identify that malicious behavior in a controlled environment, you can then block it at the perimeter or block it on the endpoint before it's able to carry out those actions. Also, make sure that your anti-malware engines use contextual rules to identify malicious use of legitimate applications. And what I mean by this is, you can't just block PowerShell on a Windows computer. I mean, you can, but you'd be severely limiting your own ability to manage that endpoint and potentially impacting a lot of legitimate applications that use that tool. What you can do is use anti-malware engines that will allow it to run in general, but watch what it does. So that if suddenly that PowerShell script starts disabling the anti-malware scan interface built into Windows, you can raise enough red flags and block that threat before it's able to finish executing and clean up anything that it's touched. And when it comes to the endpoint, you want to make sure that you're pairing both endpoint protection with endpoint detection and response. And if you're trying to wrap your head around exactly how these two work with each other, endpoint protection is all about stopping that threat from executing. With pre-execution rules, with signatures and contextual detection rules, information about how that file or script or whatever ended up on that endpoint, and preferably block it before it's able to execute. While it's executing, it can watch with contextual detections to figure out exactly what it's doing and potentially stop it before the real bad stuff happens. They often include tools that allow you to clean up an infection, so delete any files it's touched, delete any registry entries it's touched, roll back the system to a clean state so that it's usable to the end user again. Endpoint detection response, on the other hand, is designed to catch anything that slips through the cracks. Instead of just trying to block everything that runs, It will watch what is running and look for any red flags. It uses things like in-memory anti-exploit tools to look for known bad actions or suspicious actions, raise enough alerts, and once that gets over a risk threshold, shut it down. That often comes with threat hunting services to look for malicious activity across an entire organization to stop the spread of a malware infection. And then on the response side, once you've identified something that your other layers of security have missed, you're able to go in and remediate as quickly as possible to stop a bad event from turning into a serious incident. So I hope this was helpful. Thank you for watching this video, and I will see you around next time.